Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Annapolis Board of Appeals regular meeting for October the 1st, 2024. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast on the city's YouTube channel. The agenda for tonight's meeting may be found on the City of Annapolis website. The agenda will have links for you to the YouTube channel, so you know where to find that. They'll have links to a comment form where you can sign up to provide written comments or oral comments. And there'll also be links to the city's database that will provide you information about the cases that you'll hear coming before the board tonight. So let me remind everyone before we get started that communications with the board, any member of the board, in any case by anyone other than a party to the case, must go through the comment form on the city's website. All communications by parties with the board have to go through Kim Consoli, the liaison from the Department of Planning and Zoning to the board. No one should contact any member of the board directly about any case. So we'll begin with calling a roll. Kim, please.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Dr. Chen?
Present.
Mr. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Zazali?
Here.
And Mr. Hector?
Here.
All right, thank you. So first we'll look at the agenda. I think you've all had a chance to look at it. I have a suggestion again. I try not to do this very often, but it seems like it's happened a couple of times recently. The case on Chesapeake Street, I think might take a bit longer than the others, so I'd suggest we modify the agenda to move that one to the end so we don't hold everybody up. Is that all right? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion. Go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have minutes for September 18, 2023. Have we had a chance to review them? Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
I move that the minutes for the September 18th meeting be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you again. All right, getting down to real business. We're going to start with special exception 2024-008, application by Lighthouse Liquors LLC, applicant to expand their existing liquor store into the existing adjoining vacant storefront at 2012 West Street. So who would like to introduce that for the city?
I will. Kim Burke, Planning and Zoning. As you said, this is a special exception to expand the liquor store into the neighboring vacant storefront. There's no changes to the exterior of the building. It's an interior renovation only. And a liquor store is a special exception use in the BCE zone. This liquor store has actually been there for so long that it doesn't even have the original liquor store didn't have a special exception because it predated the zoning code to have one. So that's how long this has been here. So the new property owners just wish to expand the interior for more freezer space, to offer some additional items for sale, and I'm sure that their attorney is going to tell you more about it.
Let me ask you, so the city recommends in favor,
The city does recommend in favor.
and you're satisfied that notice and posting rules have been complied with?
Yes, they have given me this affidavits.
Have we had any public comments?
No public comments.
I have one more question for you. The staff report notes that Mr. Lashinsky's view is that the proposal as it stands is inconsistent with specific portions of the comprehensive plan, yet you recommend in favor. What's going on there?
That's correct, because this is an existing building, and I've discussed this with Mr. Lashinsky. This is very similar to the last three special exceptions that just came before this board. There's no exterior modifications going on, so the city doesn't require any parking lot or any exterior renovations to be made when it's an interior only. Just, it would be the same as if somebody else came and wanted to rent that storefront next door. That was a non-special exception. They could just get a use and occupancy permit and start up business. We would not require them to make any changes either. And also, I know Eric did mention about the sidewalk. The state highway came in, I think, in 2013 and put a state highway concrete apron entrance through the frontage of the whole property. So it is ADA compliant for an entrance and was installed by the state highway. We did ask them to plant some, shrubs in the buffer along the grass area, or whatever they can plant on the sides out of the site visibility triangle to kind of make it a little bit nicer. But it's not required.
All right. So who would like to be heard on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Brian Lyman, Lyman. I'm at Home Brown Madero, and I prepared the statement in support of the special exception for submission to Ms. Burke. I have next to me the family.
Thank you. Again, my name is Brian Lyman, and I prepared the statement in support of the special exception. I have seated next to me the family members, the proprietors at Lighthouse Liquors. Bhavika Patel acquired the property and is the liquor licensee as the business owner for Lighthouse Wine and Spirits. The corporate name is Lighthouse Liquors, Inc., and they lease from Rokadia Properties, which is partially owned by her husband, who goes by Paul Patel. Pankaj Kumar is his actual name, and their son Happy is the main manager, who is always at Lighthouse Liquors, Lighthouse Wine and Spirits, if you were to stop in there and request a particular beverage. The family lives in an apartment on Spa Road. They're Annapolitans. They have other family members who are here in Anne Arundel County. This is sort of a chicken and an egg thing as far as the exterior cleanup. The unit next door contained a wig store. That tenant has moved out, and the property next door, the unit is vacant. So as the landlord is looking for if the liquor store could be expanded for that liquor use to basically double up the square footage of the store. They intend to invest significantly in the interior and make exterior modifications if and when that's appropriate. But they need to know whether the liquor store would be expanded inside before they determine whether or not they should make changes to the facade and exterior, including some of the comments from Mr. Lashinsky as far as adjusting the ingress and egress, the plantings on the property and what have you. So this application is basically to determine whether or not this board would give its approval. They then would obviously need to go to the liquor board, have the liquor board approve the expansion of the premises as well into the now vacant unit. As Ms. Burke described, this license has existed here for, I believe, in excess of 60 years. And the building itself is dated as well and is in need of improvements. Rather than making those improvements to the existing premises over the past year, this plan has sort of been in the works to see if they could expand the floor plan and the footprint. You have the materials that we've submitted. You have the proposed expansion. We're basically going to, I believe, triple the cold storage space that would improve their product selection for the community and for customers, and really allow them to be, I think, more competitive in offering a greater product mix and enticing additional clientele and customers for the wares that they offer. They're looking to, I don't know if any of the board members have particular sort of thoughts or memories of this, but this particular store had significant issues before the Patels acquired it. It had several violations. I don't want to go as far as say as it was a blight in the community, but there were issues with the management of this particular establishment. Ms. Patel and her son Happy have worked hard to try to overcome those. They have reduced the selection of single beers and prevented consumption on their premises and on the adjacent Woodlands premises. That issue, they've enhanced the premises with putting an exterior fence around the parking area. If you haven't really been by the property, I would urge you to stop by and have a look at the exterior sort of adjustments that have been made. And they're looking to get permission to expand the store to make it a more economically viable investment for them, for the improvements they intend to make or hope to make by investing a significant sum in the refurbishment. They're likely to refurbish the store whichever way it goes. If the store is expanded, it'll be expanded, and the refurbishment will be for both of the units. If the store is not expanded, they still plan some refurbishment because the store is dated and does need some interior refurbishment. That's what I have to present to the board. I'm happy to try to address any questions, but it really is sort of a situation where they acknowledge that the exterior could use some freshening up also. It's just that the administrative steps in order to determine what that should be and the best plan for that involves this step first, then a trip to the liquor board to have the liquor board approve the expanded floor plan and square footage inside the establishment. And if not, then the landlords, I'm sure, will find a tenant and there will be an appropriate use permit, as Ms. Burke suggested, for that. We're hopeful that the board agrees with Ms. Burke's assessment and authorizes the special exception as requested.
Thank you. Kim, do we have any public comments?
There's no public comments.
Okay. Questions from the board?
One, keep consistent with any special exceptions that involve alcohol. I do ask if there's any history of call to service from the police department, known or identified. Have we heard of any?
No, we unknown. Typically, if there is something of a problem, we would hear from the surrounding community.
Okay. That was my only question.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you all very much. We'll close the record. Kim will mark the exhibits. And once we've heard these other cases, we'll get around to deliberating, and we should have an answer for you later this evening.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the next case will be 2024-009. Variance application by McGuckian LLC, property owner, for reduction to the required established front yard, average ridge, and rear yard setbacks to allow construction of a new single-family dwelling at 1207 McGuckian Street. Mr. Meekins, is that you?
That would be me, Mike Meekins, Planning and Zoning. You took the words out of my mouth, Mr. Gallagher. So this is, like you said, proposal for a new dwelling on a property that is raw land. It's just grass and a tree. Planning and zoning, the mailing, signposting, and newspaper advertisements have been met, and there were no public comments received. The one thing I might add is the configuration of the proposed dwelling takes into account an existing silver maple tree, and the configuration of that dwelling is designed to attempt to save and preserve that tree on the property.
That one's not falling down?
Yeah, the irony of this compared to the last meeting is pretty funny. So,
Sorry.
so that is the overview from planning and zoning, and I will, if you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
All right. Who would like to be heard for the applicant?
Sure. My name is Jay Hewitt. I'm the architect on the project and also the single member of the LLC that owns the property.
All right, Mr. Hewitt. Do you affirm, subject to the penalties for perjury, that the evidence you'll give tonight will be the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
I do. All right, we've read all your materials. I think we're pretty familiar with it. Staff did a pretty good job in the report, pulling it all together. So just tell us what you think we really need to focus on.
Sure. I guess all I would add to the report that Mike did was that we've met with planning and zoning a couple of times to kind of arrive at this configuration. This footprint is about the minimum that is workable for the lot in terms of what is needed for the single-family house. One of the criteria was to have a first floor bedroom suite that would be used for aging in place.
I can understand that.
The color of my hair sort of gives that away. And so that, along with the tree, which it's imperative to us to keep the tree because it's really the single most important element on the lot because the lot's so small. And all of the first floor space is really laid out to kind of focus kind of on that part of the lot and maximize what is left over. I'd also just mention that when this lot was created in 1992, the zoning regulations were different. And you can see that on the boundary survey, the original boundary survey that was actually done by Mike's dad. And it shows sort of the buildable footprint with a 25-foot front setback. But as the zoning laws have changed over the years, and we have to average faces of the block and deal with not only the setback, but also the ridgeline setback, it's created really the issue that we have here for the most part. We're asking for two variances on the front. One is the front yard setback, which essentially is the 25 feet that's allowed in the zoning code. But because the existing lots on the block, which is very short, has 3 one-story houses, well, 2 houses and 1 structure that are set further back, partly because they have 200-plus deep lots. It's sort of, again, that's kind of what's created the issue, along with the second variance, which is the ridgeline setback. In meeting with planning and zoning, our original footprint was basically 2 stories to the 25-foot setback for the front yard setback that we're requesting. In deference to the 1-story houses in the block, I managed to be able to set the second floor back about 7.5 feet, and which would help in the scale of this versus the rest of the houses on the block. And then the third variance, of course, is the one in the rear, which is, basically one we could have gotten on an administrative variance, but is included in the whole package. I think that's it. Again, I'll just mention again that I've worked very hard with planning and zoning, and I've worked really hard with the program of the house. It's a little, right around 2,700 square feet, so it's not a large house, but it really is the minimum that we need to make this, viable. So I'll just take any questions from anyone that has any.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hewitt. questions from the board?
I'd like to just dive a little more deeply into your testimony that it is the absolute minimum requirement. It's something that we take pretty seriously here. So as you are an architect, I will ask you to answer in that capacity rather than the homeowner.
Sure.
What would you consider the minimum width for a bedroom to be plausible?
The minimum width?
Yeah. Or the minimum area or length and depth, and just sort of broadly speaking, you have 2 upstairs bedrooms. They're not dimensioned, so I would like to have your testimony support that they are the minimum size.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Well,
You want to know
because
what size the
ultimate-
bedrooms are?
Well, my logic here is that the projection, the 5'3" that is projecting over the rear yard setback, you see that? That is
Yes.
really driven by the combined horizontal projection of those 2 bedrooms being stacked. So if your testimony is that those bedrooms are the minimum size, then we get to the 5'3" as minimum relief, but they're not dimensioned. So I would like your testimony as the architect to just support the dimensions of those bedrooms and that they are the minimum plausible size.
Sure, I can tell you what they are. I would also say that it's also the living space on the ground floor that's driving both of these things, so, so let me tell you what the, so the furthest bedroom is basically almost about 10'6" wide.
That's perpendicular to the bed axis?
Yes, it's 10'6" by, because it doesn't have the
Yep.
hallway,
Yep.
10'6" by 17, basically.
Okay, and then
And the interior bedroom is basically about the same, 11 feet.
11 feet. Okay, and it's your testimony as an architect that a 10'6" wide bedroom is functionally as narrow as you'd care to?
Yeah, it's the minimum.
Okay.
I mean, you know, you can kind of see the bed.
I understand it,
Yeah.
but I want the testimony to reflect.
Yes,
Okay,
I would say that the bedrooms are at a minimum
Okay.
footprint.
thank you, that was all I had.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir. We will close the record, and as I said with the previous case, we'll deliberate when we've gotten through the agenda tonight.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. All right, we come to variance 2024-015, application by William and Martha Mers, property owners, for disturbance of steep slopes, buffer and expanded buffer for a deck replacement, screen porch addition, and front porch addition to the existing house at 318 Halsey Road. Is that you, Ms. Burke?
That's me. You want to? Okay. Right, okay. So the applicant has some exhibits to help just clarify the stuff that's already submitted. Do you want him to give those to you now?
This is something that's not in the file already?
It's just, it's basically separating out what the drawing, it's like,
Sure,
it's a color, like a color exhibit of like the expanded buffer. It's just
Good.
clearer for you to see.
good.
You want to
If you
give
have
them?
one for Ms. Consoli, too, that would be good.
Yeah, just give them one of each. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes,
Okay, so this is the variance for steep slope buffer.
Thank you.
And an expanded buffer. This property is on the water. It's non-buffer modified, so there is an expanded buffer, which basically, as you will see from the exhibits, encompasses the entire property. So there's no way that you could do any addition or modification to this house without a variance. Planning and zoning considers these modifications as far as the ground disturbance minimal. They're redoing the rear deck. They're adding a small screened-in porch, and they're doing some additions to the front yard, which is the street side of the house, which is a lot of that is over where the existing driveway is. There is a concrete pad underneath the existing deck that they're removing, which will end up being an overall reduction in lot coverage with this project. So the city supports this effort.
Notice and posting have been.
Yes, and we received the affidavits, the ad was in the Capitol, no neighborhood comments.
No comments.
I don't know if Mr. Evans wants to explain the exhibits, but basically I highlight, in the mailing that I sent to you, I highlighted the expanded buffer and the steep slope buffer, and he just broke them down separately so you could see them clearer.
All right, well, maybe who would like to be heard on behalf of the applicant?
Sure, yes. My name is John Reinhardt. I'm the architect for this project. And
Would you like to give us your address?
sure, 6719 44th Avenue, University Park, Maryland.
And Mr. Reinhardt, do you affirm, subject to penalties for perjury, that the evidence you give tonight will be true to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Right.
The homeowners, Bill and Martha Mertz, are sorry that they could not be here today. They had a trip that was already planned before they knew about this. And they did prepare a written statement, and I don't know if that was distributed to everybody or not. No. So would it be all right if I read that right now?
That's not attached to the report.
I didn't receive a written statement.
I can summarize it.
Yeah, please.
I have 7 copies of it if you want me.
No, please summarize.
Okay.
Okay, they're sorry they couldn't be here. They are requesting this variance to improve the home, which has already been stated is completely within the critical area, and it really can't be improved without a variance. The improvements are considered to be relatively minor. We're not trying to make this into a mansion. We're keeping the footprint of the house intact. And we are, as stated, we're doing some small additions. There's a screen porch on the water side and a porch on the street side. The square footage of the house is actually, the finished square footage is not being increased. It's just porches and deck that's being added. There is going to be a new attic that will be unfinished, so that's not finished space. They're very interested in being good stewards of the property. They're aware that they're on the water and they need to be careful with what they do. So in addition to this variance, they've done some work on with a living water line that's already been permitted and in process. They've removed some very old concrete and stone stairs that went down to the water, and they're going to replace that with something a little more forgiving to allow the water to permeate through there. They basically want to modernize the house. It was built in 1966. It has not really been improved since that time. One of the primary things they're trying to do is to get, again, as was stated in a previous case, aging in place. They want one level. Right now it's, for some reason, that whoever built the house wanted it a couple of steps up to the bedroom level and then a step down to the office area and then another step down to the main living level, which makes it obviously difficult for anybody to get around the house. They're updating the kitchen. It's an extensive renovation, but as I mentioned before, the footprint is not being increased. And they're very interested in working with professionals such as Mark is with Drummond Loika, the civil engineer, myself, the architect, and we don't have a contractor on board yet, but we're interviewing obviously licensed and insured contractors that would do a good job. We're going to be very careful with the site, and Mark can speak in a moment about what some of the plans are for the site. But in terms of the architecture, that's summarizes what we're trying to do.
My name is Mark Evans. I'm with Drum Loic & Associates, one of the principal owners of the company. We've been working with John.
All right, Mr. Evans, do you affirm that, subject to penalties for perjury, the evidence you give tonight will be true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
All right, you may go ahead.
So Drum Loic worked with Mr. and Mrs. Mertz and John in the city of Annapolis to look at the site plan. As you see in the little red exhibit, the entire site, except for right near the existing Halsey Road, is all in the expanded buffer, so no matter what we did, we were going to need a variance. The site is also surrounded by steep slopes, which the second exhibit that I presented to you has the yellow area that is outside the 25-foot buffer to steep slopes. So it's just this little window of an area that isn't either in the steep slope buffer or steep slopes or there. So we have a limited area that we were trying to work with. We worked with the Mertzes to try and keep the footprint, with the exception of a couple of small porch additions, the same footprint, and go up rather than trying to go out, so that we don't disturb, in the layout and limit disturbance we have, we don't disturb the steep slopes themselves, only their buffers. But no matter what we do, we were going to disturb the expanded buffer. We worked with the limited disturbance. This site has is a total of 1.35 acres, but it's divided into the limited development area, the critical area, and RCA development. And so in a situation like that, you are only allowed 15% in each. So while the whole site, if it was just LDA or RCA, would allow like 8,800 square feet of impervious area, where the house is in the LDA, so we are limited to what it has, and it's grandfathered because it was constructed before critical area laws and city codes, but you can't go more than that. We can't steal any from the RCA, so we kept the footprint tight. We're taking out this old concrete patio that was underneath the deck that just got built over top of, and a couple other small areas, but we're actually reducing the impervious area on the site from its original grandfathered 6,228 square feet down to 6,093 by this extra removal. And so we're trying to keep it tight, keep it off the slopes no matter what. As you can see from the steep slope buffer exhibit, there's a very minimal area that isn't in the steep slope buffer, but we're trying to work with it. As part of the findings and recommendations, the city has let us know that they want a grading permit for this project. So it will have sediment control design and stormwater management design as best it will work. The second exhibit I had given you with the yellow just shows how we would conceptually work a rain garden within the steep slope, outside the steep slope buffer, to try and take some of the roof leaders to treat the site, but we are limited in what we can do stormwater management wise. We don't want to clear trees. We can't go in the steep slope buffer or the steep slopes. So we've thought it through as to what we can do for this site, but we're trying to keep the footprint tight to keep the limit of these disturbances in a minimum area.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. Kim, in your report, you mentioned that you were waiting for a report from the Critical Area Commission. Did that ever come in?
It did not. They only asked for a breakdown of the lot coverage for the more proof for the reduction, which was attached in your packet. And then they did not comment after that.
And just a quick question, and you may have mentioned it, and I may have missed it. The current state of stormwater management of the property?
Currently, there's no stormwater management on the property, and so in working through what we're disturbing and trying to keep reducing impervious area no matter what,
right,
that's fourth exhibit I gave out,
Right.
I looked at what we could do within, you can't put any stormwater management devices in the steep slopes or their buffers. So I've worked to try and be able to grab some of these existing roof leaders to a rain garden in that area that you see on that fourth exhibit off the house, in an area where we could take the roof leaders to it to help treat. And then we will be doing 3-to-1 mitigation planning for any permanent and temporary disturbance that we have.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I noticed the garage addition is pretty modest, 76 square feet. Are you just making it deeper? Is that the?
Yeah, we're bringing it a little closer to the street by about 3 feet. The reason actually is it extends across the front of the house, becomes a little front porch. So that's an aesthetic decision. The garage doesn't really have to be any deeper, but it will
Okay.
help aesthetically.
I understand now. I was just thrown off a little bit because it said garage addition, but then the existing photo showed a garage, and then it only added up to 76 square feet, so I thought.
It's a very small addition.
That's a bicycle. Okay, I'm satisfied. Thank you, Bob.
Dr. Shen?
I have the same question.
Mr. Hector? All right, thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. We'll close the record and mark the exhibits, and
No, we don't do public.
we don't have any comments.
Nobody signed in, no comment.
All right, our last case this evening, special exception 24007, application by PBB Properties LLC, property owner to allow after the fact special exception for an accessory dwelling unit in the R2NC district located at 813 Eastern Avenue. Mr. Meekins?
Yeah, thank you. Mike Meekins, City of Annapolis Planning and Zoning. Mr. Chairman, that is actually 813 Chesapeake Avenue. I believe you said Eastern Avenue.
Do I get the number? What is it?
No. 813.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Beg your pardon. Chesapeake Avenue.
Right.
So as you described the application, it's on the property is an existing single-family dwelling and also an existing accessory structure. And the intent is to, as you said, after the fact, legalize an ADU. And within the R2NC zone, ADUs are permitted, but they require special exception. The applicant properly went through the notification process, mailings, signposting and newspaper advertisement, and I have affidavits of such. There were actually 2 public comments received to date regarding the application, and I can go into those if you.
I saw the one from Mr. Rogers. I don't think I've seen the other one.
So, yeah, I had sent the board Mr. Rogers' comments. The other was an email exchange that had been going on with a neighbor located at 820 Chester Avenue. And it was more or less a run-through of the need for a special exception to approve an ADU. It was more information sharing and just guiding that neighbor through what the process would be like, and he asked if there would be a rental license needed, and that is a requirement and a condition within the staff report.
All right. So this is the first, it's not the first ADU special exception we've had, but it's the first one that's after the fact. And it has some other unique twists to it. That's why I moved it to the end of the agenda. So who would like to be heard on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening, Kira Wheatley from Hyatt and Weber. I'm representing the applicant tonight. We have, as you know, today, an application for a special exception to approve an ADU after the fact. It's a detached converted garage at the rear of the property. The property is currently owned by PBB Properties. They purchased the property last October with the understanding that the ADU was in compliance with all city code requirements. I have with me today Mark Powell, who's from Atwell Engineering, who created some of the exhibits in the packet that I provided for you tonight. And then I also have with me Catherine Flanders and Nell Marie Cheney, who are owners of the property. They have an interest in PBB Properties. So if you have any questions for them tonight, but for the most part, I will go ahead and just proffer what their testimony would be. It's largely repetitive of what we've provided to you already. I've given you physical copies of our exhibits 1 through 11. I would ask that those be incorporated into the record.
They will be. You don't need to be repetitive. We've read it all.
Yeah, well, I think we just want to emphasize that, from their perspective, they purchased this property with the, intent of having Miss Cheney live in the property, or live in the converted ADU in the rear of the property, and then use the main dwelling as a source of rental income. They haven't begun renting that property because when they went to go get a license, they were informed that the ADU in the back was not in compliance. So we wanted to go ahead and get the use certified before we went and got the short-term rental license, which is, their full intent to do. The property was built pursuant to building permits that were approved and had gone through that process. I think it was built in 2016, which was before the ADU statute was enacted. So likely that's why it wasn't obtained, before. But it was advertised as a property that could be lived in the back. So that's their intent to use it as such. We believe that it meets all the requirements. It's just one ADU on the property, detached from the principal structure, has separate ingress and egress. There's parking on gravel driveways and the concrete pad out back, as you'll see on your exhibits 7 and 8. The square footage of the livable area is below the maximum 850 square foot requirement. And the lot, there's no increase in lot coverage. This is an existing structure. They don't have any plans to alter the structure in any way or to add any other ADUs or alterations to even the principal dwelling. I will just note that on the exhibit 8, or exhibit 7, sorry, which is the lot coverage exhibit, it notes the proposed shed that we had included on this exhibit when we submitted for a zoning certificate from the city for that shed. So that's why it says proposed. It's now been approved and allowed on the property, and with no which does not make the property go above the lot coverage, maximum lot coverage requirement. So that's really all I have to add. So unless there's any questions for Mark or for the property owners, I think we'll just go ahead and submit on the exhibits that we provided and answer any questions you have.
I think there probably will be. So let me ask each of you, do you affirm that subject to penalties for perjury, the evidence you give tonight will be true to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you. Questions from my colleagues?
I'll let Dr. Chen go first.
I have a few questions for Mike. And they go to planning and zoning's policies as they relate to the ADU code. The first one is parking. So is it correct that if there is off-street parking for a residence, if there is off-street parking available, that's a requirement, that a parking space off-street be available for the main residence, and then there needs to be a parking space for the ADU.
Yes,
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So is there sufficient parking
Yes.
off-street?
Yes, there is sufficient off-street parking.
And where is that parking on the drawing?
So.
Is it on Billy John Alley?
Billy John Alley, it's basically just labeled as gravel and concrete, but those are the parking spaces on either side of the ADU/accessory structure in question here today.
Oh, okay. So I asked the applicants, is that space available for parking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I walk that alley almost every morning with my dog, so.
I think when I discussed with them, they said how many cars would it fit?
It fits 3 very easily. It can fit 4.
Okay, super, thank you. And then with regard to the ownership of the property, is it planning and zoning's policy that it can be owned by a corporation and not an individual? And the ownership of both structures, it says this will be a condition. Should it not exist at the time that we issue the special exception, that they are co-owned?
Well, they are co-owned, and that might be a typo on my part.
Okay.
So they're co-owned, and there's a definition, it's not actually in Title 21, it's in 17 regarding ownership, and it's a person or persons or an entity that has fee simple title to the property, and in this case, the applicants check that box. So they do own that property.
Okay, so it's not in the ADU code that it needs to be, because I thought the purpose was that they didn't want businesses buying up properties and turning them into double rentals.
Well, so at least one of the owners needs to occupy one of the structures on
Got
the
it.
property.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Very helpful. And then I was a little bit confused about the impervious surface section. Sorry. Could you just explain your explanation under that with regard to stormwater management? I read it a few times and I just didn't quite understand.
So they are in the IDA of the critical area, and they're allowed 50% lot coverage. In the exhibit from Atwell, their lot area is below 50%. I'm looking for the total square, it's 8,000 square feet. And their existing plus proposed, and I'll describe that in a second, is 3,929 square feet. So they're under the limitation. But to clarify, that also includes the proposed shed, the 8x12 shed that is approved, from what I understand, approved. I was not aware that it was approved as of yet through a zoning certificate. So all of that said, they are under their impervious limitation. When they went through the permit process for the garage itself, there was a mitigation plan for the disturbance and the lot coverage that was previously approved. So again, other than going through the application process for the shed and meeting those requirements, stormwater management has already been addressed, again, because there is really no new construction on the property for the ADU itself.
Got it. Super helpful, thank you. And the last question is under the interagency review. a building permit is required. I was just confused.
Yeah, it should read a rental license would be approved.
All right. Great. That's all I have.
Mr. Hector? Gentlemen? Go ahead.
So PBB owns the property, right? That is the entity that owns the address, correct?
It's on the title.
It's on the title. And one or both of you are the owners of BPP. And you are also the tenant to BPP.
She
right?
is.
Okay, got it. So there you satisfy one of the dwellings is occupied by one of the owners. So if you were to sell the entity PBB and no longer be an owner, but still a tenant, you would be in violation.
Correct.
What is the point? You don't have to tell me, but does the city revoke? What happens if the entity that is the LLC or incorporation or S Corp or whatever BPB is sold, but you sell it in its totality, so it retains its title and name and ownership, and you're buying the company, and I buy it from you, and now I rent the main house to somebody else, and now we're not satisfying the ADU requirement. How do we handle that?
I think I'm open for input from my colleague, but I'll take a stab at it. That would be theoretically cleaned up by the license, the rental license agreement, which would most likely have to be renewed. And ideally, that research and that renewal process would hopefully flesh out that scenario.
Ms. Burke, you want to add some enthusiasm to that statement?
I mean, technically, like Mike said, it's what's on the rental license, and a lot of these, there's really no way of tracking if it's not a new LLC. So unless there was a complaint and which is how we catch a lot of people, there's a neighborhood complaint that there's something going on, and
Right, so
those owners moved out, and then we can get them that way.
Let's run it a little further to ground. Some 3-5 years later, they do sell it, title transfer, the corporation papers transfer to new ownership. And through the due diligence of some concerned citizen, they noticed that the ownership of BBB is no longer, I'm sorry, Catherine Cheney's Fland, the people that own it now. What would happen? Would the license?
They would revoke their rental license, and they wouldn't be.
Who's they?
Or Lisa Manker, who is
Our code
enforcement officer,
or code enforcement.
would give them a violation, and then, what's her name, Mary?
Okay. So it's
Would
only,
revoke the license, and then we would require new proof of
Owner
occupancy. What we typically ask for is the driver's license with that owner and their address on it.
so the only mechanism to satisfy the enduring one of the dwellings has to be occupied by an owner is long-term public policing of property ownership.
There's not a perfect system. There's no way of knowing. I mean, people buy houses and LLCs all the time.
So I'll turn it back onto the applicants here. You don't have to answer, but do you wish to explain the ownership structure, why it is structured the way it is?
The ownership, the LLC, it's a LLC that is created to own property. So the inner workings behind why that LLC is created, I'm not sure it really needs to be dispelled right now. The LLC does own this property. It's currently the only real estate property that the LLC owns. They don't have any intention to sell it right now. They both have an ownership interest in it, and the owner is occupying the ADU. So, not sure.
That's your answer. The testimony will stand. There's no intention. Once again, we've waded into murky waters of the chapter and code and violation and enforcement in the city. Who would ever believe that?
I'm sure we're going to come back to that in deliberations.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael?
Following on Mr. Zazali's questions about I'm curious about the rental agreements, the rental licenses granted by the city. Are they, I've read through the code. Are they renewed annually? Do they come up for annual renewal, or is it just for perpetuity?
Rental licenses are
Yes, they are renewed annually.
Is it a standard, or are they customized to each property?
No, it's a standard.
It's a standard.
Yeah, they're earmarked for review every year.
pay a fee, get an inspection.
And they're inspected, yes.
They are inspected
Yes.
annually?
Yes.
It's, I'm looking, Michael, at what your recommendations are, staff recommendations, the conditions that you placed. As I was reading this and listening to Mrs. Zali's questions, in the last line, and the approval shall cease and terminate upon any unauthorized changes to the approved plans and conditions. That doesn't speak to the license, though. It's just as the plans and conditions.
The license was mentioned somewhere in the application, I think.
But is it in this conditions, though?
It was not in the conditions. We certainly can take that under, it's already a
It
requirement.
just says in F, a rental license will be a condition.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's in there, that's
Yep,
fine.
In the satisfying of the conditions. It's
Yeah.
mentioned.
That's it for me at the moment.
Okay, I'm gonna dig into a little history if we can. Does anyone know, Mr. Rogers asserts that before the applicants bought the property, it had been rented. Does anyone know whether that's true or not?
The city is not aware of that.
The applicants know?
The property was advertised as a, opportunity for a relative to live in or to serve as a rental property. So what he was doing before, I don't think they can really testify to that.
So if there were any tenants in there when you bought it, they moved out?
There were no were there any tenants when you bought the property?
No.
It was empty.
And how's the property been occupied since you bought it about a year ago?
Well, my mom went to move in and we found all this out, so we're just slowly, she's staying like in sort of both of the places. She stays in mine, which is the front, and then is slowly moving into the back as we are going through this process.
Okay.
So that leads to an interesting question. As you are the owner occupier, why does they need the ADU? She can live anywhere on her property if she wants.
Are you asking me why
I'm asking, in this condition, if there is no,
But they want to rent it.
Yeah, I think.
if they want to rent it to themselves.
No, they want to rent it to a third party.
Oh, and then you're
The
going to
main
move in, but
house.
what was your
They
testimony
want
that
to
you're going to live
rent
in
the
the small
front
one or the big one?
house.
So the overall goal, if this were to pass, is that my mother will live in the ADU, which we call the carriage house, and we will rent the front after we get the license to do so.
So under that condition, she could just live in the carriage house and then she needs an ordinary rental license for the big house.
No,
When we went,
Explain that to me.
so in order to have an ADU, 2 dwelling units on the property in the R2NC,
Regardless of who lives in which one.
correct.
Okay, that's, okay, got it.
On the rental license, you specify which building is,
understand.
yeah.
But
being
you wouldn't
rented.
get
But it would
two
apply to the
rental
whole, no, it would apply to the whole property.
Right.
Okay, so you bought it about a year ago, and around the time you bought it, you formed the LLC, and the trust, of which Ms. Flanders is one of two trustees, was the sole owner of the LLC at that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
The LLC was formed around the time that they bought the property.
Correct.
And Ms. Cheney was not an owner of the LLC at that point.
At that time, when they purchased the property? no.
Yes. She became an owner when the operating agreement came into existence in May of this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're good. Okay. So the only owners until May was the trust, which had two trustees.
Correct.
All right. Among other reasons, it's clear from reading the operating agreement, I think, that the LLC was created, at least in part, for tax reasons. It's interestingly called what is it? A disregarded entity. It's defined as a disregarded entity. Am I wrong about that?
I don't understand your question.
The operating agreement says that the LLC is a disregarded entity for tax purposes. So Ms. Cheney had an interest in the LLC in May of '24. And that apparently was when you realized you needed to get a special exception. Is that right?
I'd say so.
What's he asking?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand what he's asking.
What's he asking?
Yeah, yes, that when they found out that they needed the special exception for the property, and there's certain conditions that need to be met for the property, we had to evaluate the ownership interest in the property.
So there was, it had been 2 years at the time you bought it.
And
Hasn't been 2 years.
it hasn't been a year
No,
since
no,
they
it's
purchased.
been a year since you bought. 2 years had passed from the time the ADU rules came into effect and you bought it. But you were not aware of those rules.
We didn't know, when we bought the house, we had no idea that the boxes hadn't been checked on the detached garage. We didn't know until we went through our own license application to find out that the people before us never got the ADU passed. It was sold to us as if it was already
So it was misrepresented to you
correct.
Correct.
by presumably the sellers and the agents.
Correct. It was
Correct.
advertised as a rental property.
Yeah, okay. So looking at the operating agreement, Ms. Cheney, her rights or lack of rights are stated pretty clearly, as I understand it. That she has no rights in the management of the LLC. All income of the LLC is credited to the account of the manager, which is Ms. Flanders. All distributions from the LLC go to the manager. And the manager can dissolve and liquidate the LLC at any time without Ms. Cheney's permission. Have I gotten any of that wrong?
The operating agreement, represents what it
Yeah, okay,
represents.
all right. I just giving you the chance to point out to me if I made an error. Ms. Cheney, did you pay anything for your 1% interest in the LLC?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Are you paying rent?
I do pay rent, yes.
And that goes to the LLC?
Yes. I think the purpose behind this, well, I just wanted to live there.
It's a very nice place, I would too.
I mean, I don't plan on moving.
Okay,
Can I pick up on one of your?
yes, sure, go ahead.
All of these exhibits that you've statement in support of special exception, some of them I assume are the original listings. I didn't read every line, but your testimony was that it was represented to you that it was a rentable accessory dwelling. And maybe they didn't use those terms. I saw where it was described as a bedroom, a cottage, a mother-in-law, but can you point to me where it actually says an income-producing rental property included?
I think I did see it.
It's in there somewhere?
I think so.
Yeah, I
If my
mean,
colleague
it's
says-
more through like our conversations with the agents, but also like there's a magazine that's out there. I don't have it in front of me, that shows that it's like represented as 2 separate living quarters. Like they both have kitchens, they have bathrooms, they have bedrooms, and then there's the YouTube video that is out there.
Is any of that in your application, entered into the evidence? Because what I'm reading, I didn't mean to cut you off, is paragraph 2 simply states, when the applicant inquired about purchasing the property, she was provided a listing that describes the property as a 3-bedroom home with a quaint garage that was converted into a stunning guest house.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
I don't see anything that would,
It said it was rentable.
right, and then it goes on further. It says many, many, many more times it's described as a guest house. So do you have evidence that, I'm not sure that, it's just, I'm trying to make sure that your testimony is supported by evidence. You made the statement that it was described to you as a rental, income-producing rental property.
Can I ask her a follow-up question to
Sure.
hopefully answer that? Catherine, did you have discussions with your agents about your intent to potentially use the property as a source of rental income?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was there any indication from either of the agents that that would not be possible?
No, and it was specifically asked several times.
You good?
Separate issue.
Let me come back to Mike now.
Okay.
I actually flipped through all those pages from eTrackit that were part of the exhibit. And one I found was very interesting. A note from the inspector said, there's no sleeping in there. So, and one of the conditions that you've proposed is that they have to comply with all of their permits. And the permit says no sleeping in there. Well, in ingress and egress are required for the ADU.
We don't have access to the plans.
All right.
That's a, in my experience, which is considerable, is the reason an inspector might say no sleeping in here is because a sleeping room, which is a term we use,
Yeah.
has to have 2 means of egress.
Yeah.
One of them can be a window of specific dimensions
Right.
and distance above the floor and not obstructed. That may or may not be the case here. I'm just offering that as why he might have offered that condition.
Were there any complaints about the rental operation of the previous owner?
Not having total recall, but I do have Mr. Rogers' statement. He did talk about the petitioner used to own, so hold on one second.
He's complaining now. I was wondering if anyone complained
Yeah.
while it was under previous ownership.
To my knowledge, no, the city is not aware of any complaints for what happened prior to this application.
So there was no citation of the former owner.
I could not find anything and track it.
And are applicants at risk of a citation if they don't get the special exception?
Well, I think one of the, I'll say triggers or requirements to have a second dwelling unit on your property, it falls into the habitable unit needs to have a stove is really the linchpin. So they are on the radar now. If they do not get approved for an additional or an ADU, 2 dwelling units on the property, I would say that they would have to remove their stove to come into compliance and not have a second dwelling unit.
Okay. It seemed to me the rules used to be tougher. People complained, probably to you guys too, that they couldn't get permission to put a toilet in their basement because it would be a ADU. All right.
Mr. Chair, I have follow-up, if you're done.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to revisit something that Christian said and Bob said, because I'm really confused now. Do you have a rental agreement with the LLC?
For the ADU?
For the space you are living in?
No.
Okay. Is it not correct that an ADU, the code restricts the size of an ADU?
Are you asking me? I don't know.
I'm asking Mike.
The code restricts the size of a accessory structure as an ADU
Yeah,
as 850 square
Right.
feet of livable space.
right. So because of that requirement under the code, the special exception would only go to this guest house in the back. I heard some conversation that the ADU could go to either building. That's not the case. It can only go to the guest house. And so there's no rental agreement between the person inhabiting that guest house. So it's not an ADU.
There's no rental agreement because she's an owner, so.
Well, then why do you need the special exception? That's the question.
Because the front,
Ollie asked.
The statute requires the owner of the property to either live in the ADU or the principal structure. So the ADU has to be approved by special exception, and it applies to the whole property. And then the rental license will be applied for the whole property, and that would also require management by someone who lives in the city of Annapolis. So with the owner living in the ADU, they can help manage the short-term rental license with the city.
and if they wanted to, they could flip it. Ms. Cheney could move into the big
To the main
house.
house, and the
they could
ADU can
rent
be rented.
the garage.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
that's the way it works.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I mean, this is a unique case for us. We're not intending to.
Happy to answer any questions.
It's been unique for us, too.
So I don't have any more questions. Anyone else? All right, so we'll close the record, mark the exhibits. Thank you very much for your patience,
No problem.
Thank you.
and we'll get back to you shortly. All right. Are we ready to deliberate? Everybody good? So shall we go with Lighthouse first? Anyone want to start off?
Mr. Chairman, in looking at the expansion, certainly within the already existing structure with no additional exterior changes, the fact that it's already been, that the egress and ingress is appropriate for that property. You quite rightly pointed out Mr. Lashinsky's point about some noncompliance with the comprehensive plan. And Ms. Burke, in her staff report, mentions that, should there be a change to the exterior, that there will be, or if that those requirements, the comprehensive plan will be met. And one of the conditions does require that they do, that the owners do some plantings along the perimeter of the frontage of the property. I think that this is appropriate. I'd be in favor of it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Burke, you did say that they put up a fence when they acquired the property, right?
They did.
Okay. I'm in favor of it.
Dr. Chan?
I have nothing to add.
Christian? Yeah, I would, I think they've met the criteria, but we do have the authority and the responsibility in granting special exceptions to try to mitigate impacts that on the public. So I would suggest that we, as we have in the last special exception, that we add back the 3 usual conditions for loitering, noise, and trash, and that we also use our new enforcement condition.
Okay.
If that works for everybody. And I would also ask that staff take a look at that last condition. It's very vague about plantings. I'd like to see something a little more concrete. Commitment of, what's the condition? I don't have it in front of me. Trees?
It's just something appropriate outside of the site visibility triangle. I know there's an actual sign, so you can't plant a tree and block the sign. So there'd probably be some shrubs around the sign, just something to make it look more native, of course, but just.
Yeah, would you try to make that a little more specific so
Okay.
they know what they're shooting for?
Got it.
They said a square footage or some
Yeah, right. Good.
quantifiable and testable.
So is there a motion to approve with those conditions?
A motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much on that one. Shall we go to McGuckian? I was good on that one. Anyone would like to lead off?
Yeah, so I'll take crack on this one. The special exception, the variance, Gotcha, yep. Motion to approve the variance on 1207 McGuckie Street based on the testimony and evidence presented here, having satisfied all 7 requirements without any failures.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. And Halsey Road, the steep slope redo of existing features. Any discussion there?
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of this application. I think that the effort has been made to keep it to a minimum. So I would move for the approval of variance to 2024-0015.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. If only all of them were that easy. So let's come back to special exception for Chesapeake Street. I'll start on this one if you don't mind. As I read through this complicated application, three questions stood out to me. One, what should be our standards when it comes to an after-the-fact special exception? Second was, I thought that it was a very aggressive set of measurements that found that the area of the existing garage fell within the 850 square feet limit, eliminating the stairs and the walk-in closet and the loft walkway where clearly the photos show usable space, a writing desk. And then the third one was ownership. So when it comes to the after-the-fact nature of things, there's nothing that gives us the authority to do that, but then there's nothing that says we don't have the authority either. And a test that's been suggested is, when the applicants came in, did they know or should they have known that they needed this at the time they bought it or shortly after they bought it? And that's always very hard to judge people's intentions. I mean, they did a lot of due diligence on the tax aspects of the transaction, but not on this. So I'm interested to hear what other people think. On the size, I think it's aggressive, but it's not beyond the pale. There are definitions of livable space that say you can exclude some of those things. So the one I'm really struggling with is the ownership. And in thinking about that, I come back to the purposes of the ADU rules to make available more moderate income housing and to give owners the opportunity to supplement their income with rental income. Thinking about ownership in, sort of layman's terms, I think about, is there control? Is there enforceable financial interests? And I don't find any of those here. I mean, the only thing we've got here is a decision by the beneficial owners. So it's owned. Individuals are representing a trust, which are the principals in the LLC. And they decide to essentially gift an ownership interest that, as far as I can tell, has no meaning other than to allow them to apply for the supplemental, for the special exception. So that's my hang-up in the case. I'm willing to say we can go along with an after the fact because I think they probably were misled or did some diligence but not quite enough. And I can go with an aggressive reading of the size of the unit, but I'm really hung up on the ownership, so I'm interested to hear what you all think.
I have no doubt that you're hung up on it as I am. As I cross-examined and questioned the applicant, I find the timing and the percentages to be troubling. And I think the code, while it was uncharted territory while it was written, and ownership was not further expanded upon in the city chapter governing this thing, perhaps it should have said majority ownership or something along those lines.
Or any element of control or financial interest.
Something that transcended, because at what point it's become so diluted that a corporation, as part of the lease, can't assign a 1% ownership of the LLC, which is terminated at a par value of $1 at the end of the lease,
Sure.
on and on into infinitum. right? And it's a $1 paper transaction, and you're now a part owner.
Yeah.
For $1. Which the approach is novel, but I find that 1% does not satisfy the ownership criteria.
Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of, I was troubled by the fact that it was an LLC that was the ownership. Is a strict reading of the statute, of the code, was, I foolishly think of it as an individual.
Yeah.
But once we started engaging in this discussion, and you brought those factors to light, and I looked at the percentages at the end of the operating agreement, that it seemed like it was, it's troubling. Yeah, it's a workaround, in the way I see it.
Doctor?
Mr. Chair, I did raise the ownership issue right off the bat because it did bother me. Living in Eastport, I followed the legislation very carefully, the ADU legislation and all of the debate that went on around that legislation, which is why I asked about ownership. I asked about parking. Those were all concerns around the legislation. And while the code does not specifically state the corporation issue, I believe that the intent of the legislation was to not allow corporations to come in, buy properties, and have 2 rentals on those properties. So that's why the ownership problem appeared to me when I reviewed the case. I do think I myself went through the ADU process, and I know when I went through it, every inch was counted by planning and zoning, including the stairs and everything. So I myself have gone through that process. With regard to the sophistication of the applicants, it's in an LLC. It's in a corporation with an operating agreement. To me, that illustrates a certain level of sophistication.
Mr. Chairman, as far as the LLC goes, the applicant said they were renting with no agreement. That's why I was puzzled.
Yeah. I think what you said, Dr. Chen, really rings the bell with me. I mean, you did follow that legislation. That was my sense, what you described, of the goals of the legislation. And I just don't see how they're advanced by this and actually goes in the other direction.
Motion?
Is there a motion?
Motion to deny the special exception application SE 2040007 for having failed to meet the requirements set forth under the conditions for ownership and very potentially square footage.
Second.
Before we vote, I neglected to offer council an opportunity to chime in. Is there anything you'd like us to think about, Cheryl?
No, other than.
You push your.
Oh, sorry. Always forget this. Other than the fact that we've noted the ADU legislation doesn't specifically prohibit an LLC from owning it in this way. It doesn't prohibit that. And so we're kind of going with the legislative history or intent of the legislation, which is fine, but we're kind of really on sort of uncharted territory.
Well, it does define as a person. I don't, Mike, if we want to read that to me again, I don't think it says person or entity. It says person.
The definition in Title 17. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't print that out.
What part of 17 was it?
Stand by.
licenses?
Seventeen 180, owner. Owner means any person who alone, jointly, or severally with others holds legal or equitable title.
No reference to a corporation.
No. Correct. No dwelling unit or unapproved property is the end of that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Anything else, Cheryl?
No, other than there are times when obviously the code is not up to date. A lot of corporations own properties, LLCs own properties. So we just have to marry that with the ADU legislation. So it's saying any one, I think it starts with any one. You know, the Supreme Court said corporations are people.
Yeah, but
So,
for campaign finance purposes, for First Amendment.
right, okay. So I don't have anything further.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry,
And what was
Yes.
vote?
no names.
I was aye.
5-0. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cheney and Ms. Wheatley, to disappoint you, but that's where we are. Any other business for us tonight? Kim, can you give us a preview of the special meeting in October?
Change the ownership, sell it to your mom.
Any person.
Okay, good thing we're doing that remotely. And didn't we talk about adding another status conference too? All right, but we don't, it's not a big agenda anyway. No, right, now that's going to stretch out to November.
They weren't available.
Okay.
I did discuss that
Yeah.
in the beginning, and they chose November.
Anything you know about Kim?
Mike and I were just talking, when is 6th Street coming back? That was that one appeal.
It's coming back in November.
Oh, November, okay.
October's for motions.
We don't, the two of us don't have anything for October 16th.
Okay. Yeah, we're, on 6th Street, we're waiting for Office of Law to file a motion to dismiss.
We got it tonight,
Just did it tonight.
Did we?
Sent it out.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I know that was a hard one for all of us, Mike. Thanks for your patience with us.
Are we closed? Motion to close? We done?
Yeah, go ahead. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, thank you.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sell the house to your mom and come back. Well, it'll get tested.